It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
We made this.
Welcome back to the special episode of We Are Starfleet, covering Star Trek Discovery Season 4. My name is Mike Slamer, and this podcast is undergoing a great evolution as Paramount CBS produces even more and more Star Trek for us to talk about. Starting in a few short days, we're going to be making the transition to Strange New Worlds, so stay subscribed to get the same quality episode coverage, reviews, breaking down those big pivotal scenes, all the emotional beats, and so much more. There will be new voices and, of course, familiar ones as Ian and I jump in and about. Additionally, regular guest here on the show and podcaster Craig McKenzie recently interviewed Shawn Doyle, Aaron Cartwright on The Expanse, Ruon Tarka on Disco, over on his podcast, kneelbeforeblog.co.uk. You can check the podcast show notes for a direct link to that episode, but stick around after this podcast episode for an excerpt of that interview. All right, with that said, let me come back around here to today's discussion. With me in the virtual studios is my regular co-host, Mr. Ian Buckley, Dr. Amy H. Sturgis, and Ashley Thomas, a.k.a. the Nerdy Blogger. So, folks, we are going to jump right into this. Here we go.
Black alert. Black alert.
All right, folks, we're here to chat some Discovery, and my oh my, it's been a season 4. During the mid-season break, we did have the chance to examine the first half of it, and I feel like we were all, as a fan base, and this group in particular, we were super excited to see how the show was going. So, of course, I had to come back to this particular group here, Dr. Amy Sturgis, we have Ashley Thomas, and of course, joining me is my co-host, Ian Buckley. So really excited to have you all back. Ian, you missed the mid-season chat, but Amy, Ashley, welcome back. Here we are talking the full season. This is great stuff. Like I said, we were going to have you guys back on the show, and here you are. So now that the season is over and we've had a chance to really kind of think about it in a big kind of a way, Dr. Amy Sturgis, hello and welcome. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then tell me what you thought of the show.
Hello, and thank you for having me back. I'm delighted to be here. So I hold a PhD in intellectual history, which is the history of ideas, and I teach classes, including a course on Star Trek, undergraduate at Lenore Ryan University and graduate at Signum University. And I am involved with the Starship Sofa podcast, and I write also about Star Trek, and I have a new co-edited volume with my colleague Emily Strand coming out next year on Star Trek. And it is just a delight to get to be with you and talk today about this season. It's not a perfect season, but it is an important one, I think. And when you put all of the stories together, I think there's a coherent and meaningful story being told. And I was glad to see how the second half fit so well thematically with the first half. So I do have quibbles, And I have, a wish list of things I would have liked to have seen or wanted to see more of. But I think the notes that were hit were really true and important and also very relevant right now. So I was glad to see how all of that came together. So I'm looking forward to talking about the details.
Amazing. Ashley, same thing to you, and especially to you because you've been talking to some people about these things that are coming out soon, about these things that have happened. So, coming from the mid-season to the season finale, and now here we are a couple months later, tell me a little bit about what you're working on, where we can find your work, and then tell me what you thought of Discovery.
Well, so hello, Ashley Thomas, aka the Nerdy Blogger. I'm over here on the We Made This podcast network, jumping in on different shows on We Are Starfleet and Make It So, Podcast 616. So talking about all the stuff I like Star Wars and Star Trek and Marvel stuff. So anyway, lots of fun stuff there, but I'm also a staff writer at fangirlish.com, where I am the Trekspert in residence, covering all the Star Trek shows. And I've had the good fortune to get to speak with not only the cast of Discovery, but Prodigy and Picard. And I actually just got to talk with the cast of Strange New Worlds a couple weeks ago. So really exciting stuff. And you can find all of those interviews, reviews, Star Trek news over at fangirlish.com. Just search Star Trek. But yeah, as for this season of Discovery, in retrospect, I think I really, really enjoyed the first half of the season, which, Amy, Mike, and I have already covered. And I still really enjoyed the last half of the season. I don't think I enjoyed it as well. I think there were some points in the middle that I'm like, we could pick up the pace a little bit, which I don't feel like is unfair, but I still had a good time, But I think they really stuck the landing with like the last couple of episodes. I mean, we're going to dig into this a little deeper, but I think the overall conversations about mental health that Disco has been having all season are incredibly important. I because of the nature of my job, I feel like I watch a lot of Star Trek all the time and I don't get a lot of time to watch other things. But the only other show I can think of that's really having the same conversation is Ted Lasso on Apple Plus. So I don't know if any of y'all have gotten to watch Ted Lasso, but 1 billion out of 10 would recommend, half hour ish comedy, great fun, but like it's so hopeful and I felt like Discovery has that same kind of hope, and it was just really refreshing to watch a show like not just Ted Lasso, but also like Discovery, what Discovery is doing here this season. But overall, pretty happy with the finished product. I think we had a really solid opener and really solid finale. The middle parts we can argue here and there, but
Sure.
On the whole, I think it was a really solid season of Disco.
Well, there is nothing better for fans to do than to argue over the little things, and that's why we're here.
Exactly. That's why people listen to podcasts, right?
Absolutely. Ian, you and I have been podcasting about the show. I know how you feel about how the season actually ended, but now that we've had a little bit of time, tell us a little bit about you, Ian. Of course, regular listeners already know, but just in case, we do have some new subscribers.
Right. Well, yes, I'm your regular co-host here. You can hear all of our past discussions on We Are Starfleet here on the We Made This network, but I also have a Star Wars podcast called The Way. We're on a bit of a hiatus now between a live action series, but we'll be picking back up with the Obi-Wan series pretty soon. So you guys can look forward to that coming up. I also pop up on podcast 616 here and there, as well as our movie podcast, Movieversaries and Real Talk. So you can hear me kind of all over the network.
Heck yeah. And with that, I think it's about time to jump into a little bit of a deeper conversation surrounding the season. So really quick, season 4 was 13 episodes, just like seasons 1, 2, and 3. So no real changes there. We did have this big mid-season break, And so I'm curious, especially with this particular roundtable, did that mid-season break help? Was it a good thing? Was it like, hey, wait a second, what's going on? Why did we take the break in the first place? There would seem to be a tonal shift. So I'm wondering, from your perspectives, was it effective?
I think it hurt the momentum of the storytelling, to be perfectly honest. Now, I may not have be the perfect ideal audience member here, because I realized that I'd sort of lost the thread, and I went back and rewatched several episodes before it began again just to get back in that zone. But the fact that I had to, and maybe other people didn't, says, there was something missing there. And I think it's because the storytelling was so carefully constructed to be building this momentum, and more importantly, telling the single story. To me, in a way, this whole season is one story. And in a way, it's also kind of speaking back to, if I may go off for a second, this to me is like a story in conversation with the original Star Trek series episode, Devil in the Dark, where you have, the miners think there's a monster that's killing them. But it turns out the miners didn't realize the rock is sentient. And the rock, the Horta, is just trying to stop the miners from destroying the eggs, right? Except you flip that, and in this season, we're the Horta. The Federation is the Horta. All the Federation adjacent worlds are the Horta. And you're dealing, with this life form that doesn't appreciate we're sentient and are in fact killing us, right?
Yeah.
And so it's speaking to a larger conversation that's already been introduced in Star Trek, sort of the big calamity that really has no villains in it.
Sure.
It's a miscommunication. And because that storytelling, I think, is pretty tight, and that building of all these moral dilemmas along the way, and the building of the tension and going toward first contact and trying to figure out what's going on, and of course the Kobayashi Maru that Burnham's dealing with, it all fits together. And to sort of cut that off mid-story and then restart it again, I think was a disservice to both the momentum of the story and the story itself. And I think I sort of envy those people who just go back and have the opportunity to binge it or rediscover it without that break. If it had been an episodic storytelling kind of thing where it was just one adventure after another, that wouldn't have hurt as much. But I do regret that it kind of got put on pause there in the middle.
Yeah, sure. Ian, what's your response to that, especially when it comes to the pacing of the two separate halves?
I'm inclined to agree. I think one of the kind of consistent criticisms that we had for this season, which I did enjoy overall, was its pacing and the sort of breakneck pace at which the story sometimes unfolded, and then the several episodes in a row where we wouldn't really get that same pace of forward momentum. And to have a big long break like this in the middle of a season where you are having this one long serialized story that you're telling, essentially, it would be like having a big mid-season break in Picard, for example, where it's one long story. And you can't really build up momentum like that if it was episodic, like Amy said, or if it was more evenly kind of bifurcated, where you have one arc being told in the first half of the season, then you have a second arc, which may be tangentially related or thematically related, but you have these two distinct arcs. That's one thing. But the kind of story that they were telling in this season, I don't think was well served by having such a big interruption.
Yeah. And Ashley, your thoughts on this, especially when it came to some of those plot threads that maybe lingered around a little bit too long?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with what Amy and Ian have said already. I felt like it was, while I didn't really have any trouble jumping back in per se, it felt like we really did kind of lose that momentum of, oh man, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And you get to watch Prodigy for 5 weeks. Okay. I mean, I wasn't mad about watching Prodigy for 5 weeks, but it didn't, and we could talk about Prodigy. I mean, that's for the Rarely Going podcast. But I'm having, I was like, and if I remember correctly, we kind of got surprised by that. We didn't know that we were going to get a 5-week break. So that was a little like, oh, by the way, you'll find out break in January. Yeah. So I don't know. The kids are home from school. Let's give them something to watch. Let's put on Prodigy, But yeah, I feel like it did kind of hurt the momentum a little bit. I haven't gotten to go back and watch from front to back now that all the episodes are available. So I'll see if I feel differently getting to watch it again in succession. But I don't feel like it did itself any favors by doing the break. And so I hope they learn from that and don't do that again with other series.
Sure. Yeah.
I know we're supposed to get 10 more episodes of Prodigy later this year. Haven't been given an exact date for that yet, I don't think. So as much as I'm enjoying Prodigy, I want it to be its own thing. I don't want it to be the filler in between the quote unquote grown up Star Trek series.
Yeah, it did feel like they kind of shoved Prodigy down our throats a little bit and put a big pause on Discovery to make sure that we watched it. It did feel a little bit like that. I feel like that second half of the season, a lot of the things that happen, especially on the Karma barge, like I had an immense amount of fun, visiting that particular planet, that particular away mission. And of course, we got some great moments out of that story. And it's like, why couldn't we get this story kind of tacked in? It could have been a quick little 20-minute adventure, right? In and out, pop into the Karma barge, pop back out. But instead it was an entire episode, and it was packed full of cool things. But in the back of your head with this big story going on, you're like, hold on, like, don't we have to go to the 10C now? Like right now? So yeah, a lot of questions there. Moving to a particular story thread that I felt got a lot of airtime, but perhaps maybe a little bit too subtle. And what I'm talking about here is Captain Burnham's evolution in the captain's chair. So over the course of the season, she kind of starts with this, episode 1, protective mama bear of her cub, of her family. Don't mess with me. Don't mess with my ship. Don't mess with my crew. And by the end of the season, she's very much, yes, Madam President, yes. Do we feel that the evolution in the chair, where she was presented with all these challenges and Captain Burnham was forced to reconcile her duty, her responsibility with all of her emotional needs and emotional ties to the personal situation that Cleveland Booker was going through? Do we feel that it was collectively done well? Do we think that Burnham evolved into that strong captaincy figure that Captain Pike saw in her? Do we feel that it was obvious to the viewer? Did I catch things that maybe Ashley didn't? And did Ian catch things that I didn't? What are your thoughts? Ian, let's start with you on this one.
Well, I'll say, at least from my perspective, those are slightly different questions that you're asking. I think the relationship evolution that Michael and Rillick had was a highlight of the season for me. I thought that was handled particularly well. I really enjoyed Rillick as a new ingredient to the dynamics. I hope she's coming back in a big way next season. I think all of that was handled really well and unfolded organically to me. I'll say I've never been the biggest fan of how Michael's journey to the captain's chair has been handled by the show. It seems like they have kind of wanted to have it both ways with this character from the very beginning, and that tension I don't think has been been treated as interestingly by the storytellers as it could have been. I think now that she is just in the captain's chair, the show just feels more comfortable to me to watch. It just feels like she is more comfortable in that chair and is getting more comfortable throughout the course of the season. I don't think that story is being told necessarily as effectively as the story of her and Rillick was for me. But yeah, I guess those are my thoughts. I think that her journey to the captain's chair was a little fraught in terms of the storytelling. Now that she's there, I like the dynamic that's in play, and I thought that her relationship with Rillick was pretty compelling to watch.
Who wants to go next?
I can, I guess. I like Michael as captain a lot. She is giving Janeway a run for her money in terms of my favorite captain, and Janeway is my captain. So I think Michael's a really close second. But I think one of the most enjoyable things for me about this whole series, or this whole season, is watching her and Rillick start to understand each other better. I think going in, that opening episode where she says, she gives the psychological eval for Michael, and I'm all like, yeah, that sounds good to me. Like, yeah, I see no problem with this information. What's wrong with you, President? But watching them see, and I also share Michael's inherent distrust of all politicians. So I found this is a very understandable reaction, but watching her understand where the president is coming from and what she has to do and how she has to try to please everyone, which no human or Cardassian, Bajoran human can do. You can't please everybody all the time, but how she has to balance that. And it's not necessarily done in a way that is manipulative or malicious or anything like that. She's proven to Michael that yes, she has to play the game, but she also she's somebody who's trustworthy. And I think that was the biggest hang up for Michael. And then President Rillick came to respect Michael for her tenacity and that same like kind of Kirkian thing of I don't believe in no-win scenarios. And I mean, this is the question we get at the beginning with Kobayashi Maru. And this is how we have to resolve that at the end. I feel like the Kobayashi Maru theme could have been a little higher, but also if they had killed Cleveland Booker, I would have like flipped the TV. Was not going to be happy about that. So yeah, there's just there was I really enjoyed that dynamic. Amy, I believe in our previous conversation, you said that Shella Horsdal and Tara Rosling had just been like stealing the show all season, and I think that that still held true by the end for me. But I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you talk about that some more.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up because I agree 100%. And I think I do see the point that it may have there been.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to. Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It may have been too subtle at points. I think we got, rather than seeing a nice linear progression, we got snapshots along the way of her journey. And by the end, we saw where she was. But I did see some things in there I had wanted to see. And one of those is, if you are rebuilding the Federation And now the Federation is having its first worst test, right? You have to step back from it's fun to be a maverick who's going rogue every day, 24 hours a day, and actually establish that there's going to have to be some procedures. And so I appreciated the way they had that tension there, and chain of command, and figures trying to figure out exactly how they were going to work together. But I think close to the end, and I'm going to just paraphrase here, I can't bring the direct quote up, but Burnham says, and I think it may have been to the general, I didn't see, or I didn't used to appreciate there was a line. I thought the line didn't exist. Now I know it does, but we haven't crossed it yet. And that was one of these moments where she's not pushing back for the sheer principle of pushing back, right? She is establishing that when she needs to stick to her guns, she will, but it will be a consistent, principled, reasoned response that then proves that she has earned her leadership. And that was a moment to me where I was like, there's the captain right there, right? And so I think we may not have seen every step along the way, but we see these snapshots of her really coming into her own. And the other thing I wanted to see, which I got in Rosetta, was Burnham using her own training and skills, and then also using her crew and showing in front of Rillick and others that leveraging her crew and their expertise and her own expertise made sense. And so when everyone else is saying, we don't have the time to go visit a planet that doesn't have anyone on it, her training tells her we have to learn the context of a culture before we can establish communication effectively. And she was right. And there was another place where she stood up, or then bringing in her crew saying, help us translate, because we need fresh eyes from different places that have different tools. And seeing how she could be the independent actor, but also be the delegator, also bring everyone together and both take commands, but then also have leaders say, no, we should be doing this, and pushing back, knowing when to push back respectively, and respectfully, rather. And in fact, again, proving that she knows when to make the decisions. I wanted to see those things, and I saw them. But I do take your point that we had to take some leaps to get to the places that she reached. But by the end, she was there, and I liked that.
I think that President Rillick was a very effective teacher, mentor on this path, whether intentionally or not. I think that Burnham really needed a person like Rillick to really show her kind of what's what. Like, you're in a new universe, you're playing new rules, you're in a new position of authority. People like you, they trust you, they respect you, and they want to see you succeed. So how do you make that work for everybody? And, to everyone's point here, I think it was very, very well done. And yeah, we made the leaps, but it came together. Other characters that kind of drove this path forward for Burnham was the 10C themselves. And I wanted to ask, of course, we're here to talk about this. So not only do I want to ask, but we're going to talk about it. So consider this a demand. The 10C as an alien creature, the design, the concept, the overall imagery of these ginormous gaseous forms of life forms, these creatures that come down seemingly out of the sky, both horrifying, callbacks to H.P. Lovecraft, of course. Ashley, how did you feel about the creature design this season?
Oh man, I got so excited watching like Rosetta, and they're down on the planet. I'm like, ooh, this is alien. Watch out for face huggers. No, this is really scary. That was my knee-jerk reaction is, oh no, we're gonna get face huggers. But then, we didn't, and that's okay. But when they finally get to meet the 10C in the episode 10C, I thought, especially like with the way their language work, you all have seen Arrival, right? 2016, directed by...
Denis Villeneuve.
Thank you. Yes, him. Amazing sci-fi film. Made me ugly cry, still makes me ugly cry every time I watch it. But I got similar like Arrival vibes, especially in like trying to communicate in a different way. Also, the use of sound and light made me think of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So just as somebody whose master's work is in intertextual, specifically in the realms of sci-fi, that just like made me happy on like 800 different levels. So I'm geeking out about it like that. I thought it was really interesting the way, we're not only using light and sound, but we're also using here's the right soup of pheromones. That seemed, everybody's caught up on Picard, right? Like this is a similar thing that we're using in Picard this season in some ways. Like, so I feel like there's a lot of cross-pollination between writers' rooms for Disco and Picard this year. But anyway, had a lot of fun with it. Really dug that we're interacting with an alien creature that isn't humanoid. It's like we're not changing somebody's nose or forehead and we're magically getting a new alien species. No, we're getting something completely different, and that was really fun. You don't see that as often on Star Trek.
You really don't. Amy, when it came to seeing something completely different, what were you thinking? Did you have an expectation?
I kept thinking about Kovich saying, however you think this is going to go, it's not going to go that way. And I loved that. I love not knowing what to expect. That feels so authentic to the whole Star Trek Enterprise. See what I did there? Of strange new worlds, right? This idea of meeting creatures that life that is completely new to us. And so I loved it. I'm glad, particularly, Ashley, that you mentioned Close Encounters, because I got that vibe too. But you just don't know what's on the other side of those colors, those lights, and the idea of using the emotions. You've got these 16 feelings that are coming at you, and it's all going to work. And I also just loved Harai altogether. I thought he was a fabulous character, and his humor and the way he, as a scientist, was coming at this question of language and communication with something that we don't understand and doesn't recognize us was a delight too. But I thought that whole thing was beautifully done. And the whole bubble with the recreation, right, is just made me think of children, putting leaves in a jar and putting a bug in there and making it feel comfortable, they think, because they've got leaves in there, right? This is a little moment. I'm going to carry this bug from here to there, and I'll put little leaves in there so it thinks it's where it's supposed to be. And that idea that we are so small.
Yeah.
And at such a disadvantage. But knowing this was Trek and knowing the point was communication, I appreciate the fact that knowing we are small and insignificant here, or at least on a completely different level beneath the evolution of this life form, doesn't mean we will be squashed, right? We just have to find a way to communicate. And so it wasn't terror. It was sort of that wonder and awe that Trek should deliver. Great aliens.
Wow. Ian, what are your thoughts on the 10C here?
Have to agree. I mean, it's not we talked when we talked about the titular 10C episode, that was likely our favorite episode of Discovery so far. I think that they had a monumental task in trying to come up with truly original seeming. I mean, yes, the Lovecraftian influence is really clear, but we haven't had that visualized in Star Trek, or really in much of popular media in general. So to have them executed that well, that effectively, to have this truly difficult puzzle of communication to resolve, and having it done in a realistic way that harkened back to familiar things like Arrival and Close Encounters, but also was in many ways original, like the whole pheromone communication thing. That was fascinating to me. The analogy of the insects in a jar is a good one, and you get that sense of this overwhelming intelligence and power and technology that we can't even begin to wrap our minds around. You think of things like 2001 too, where this artificial environment gets created somehow. We have no idea what's involved. The technology is so advanced that it might as well be magic, right? That's the whole thing. And that was all really effectively executed. Honestly, the only criticism I have of it is that it was so well done that you couldn't help but wonder, like, why we didn't get just a little bit more of it, and why we didn't just have this great episode, and then, oh, guess what? Season's over. This story's done. Everything's resolved. Everything's fine. We're all ready for the next adventure now. And I'm like, no, wait, this was incredible. This is what we've been building towards. This is the shit, man. This is that Star Trek. Give me this good Star Trek goodness. And it's just over so quickly.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
I'm just eager for the 10C to show up at a Federation Council meeting at some point next season. I was like, are they all going to come? Because that seems to be how they operate.
Yeah, is there going to be a delegation or representative at some future thing? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
It's so interesting to think about how aliens have been portrayed on Star Trek, and we're so used to just seeing, Ashley has said, forehead ridges or nose ridges or big ears, and that's it, that's our alien. Real quick, one of my favorite characters that we got this season, alien design, was Hazmazan from the Karma Barge. I love the fact that he, things went right over his head. He was very literal. Ian, we talked about it, very Star Warsian of a character. Do we need more creature design like this?
We certainly need more aliens like 10C. And I think that the whole idea of having an alien in Star Trek that, like Ashley said, wasn't just swapping out a forehead, swapping out an earpiece, swapping out a nose ridge, all of that stuff is great and is largely a relic of just the kind of the budgets that we were working with in television when Star Trek came out in the 60s and then the 80s and 90s. And now that we've expanded our budget and expanded what we can do on these streaming services visually and in terms of effects, like, there's really no reason why we can't get really weird with the stuff we put on screen. And I really do hope that this is the beginning of them kind of unshackling themselves from some of those design decisions of the past that they were kind of beholden to for budgetary reasons that really don't exist now.
Yeah. And interesting point on budgetary. The last time we had a truly outlandish, creature from another galaxy was, trying to look for their friends in the whales, and Kirk had to go back and save the whales. So outlandishness is something that Trek can do and does really well. We can get out there. Amy, what do you think about the portrayal of politics in the 32nd century, now knowing that there's extra galactic influences that, we are the bug, right? How do you think the Federation comes to grips with that reality?
That's going to be really interesting to watch. I think we already see there at the end, Earth is like, forget this, we're all in, right? We're all, the Federation is where it's got to be now. And so I think they've jump-started that process they were already beginning in terms of rebuilding the Federation, because now they see that the collective action worked and the cooperation worked. And so, again, the weirder the better in the future. And we're not shackled to the same budgetary constraints, but we're also not shackled to having to fit into canon the way a lot of the other shows are, because we're so far in the future. So things really can be weird. And I'm really fascinated by where this leaves us in terms of trying to build coalitions and trying to find areas of common ground, and then look outward, because all of these groups have also, these worlds, these peoples have been turned inward for so long because of the burn.
Yeah.
Now sort of finding their feet with each other, and how that will play out, as well as finding strength and action in numbers, because there's more out there, and now they're situated where they can encounter it. I've really appreciated a lot of the way the politics were played this time around. Again, because there were no villains. You could really genuinely understand the differences of opinion, and you could understand why different leaders came to different conclusions. Privileging survival over exploration and learning and communication, and how much time do we actually have to make all of these overtures. And I like the fact that it was not portrayed as the good guys and the bad guys. It was portrayed as different peoples trying to find the best way forward in incredibly challenging circumstances, not sure who to trust.
Yeah.
And sometimes trusting people whose also understandable motivations were leading them in other directions. So I hope they stick with that as well, because being able to see the motivations of the different characters and understand why that happens, as opposed to having the mustache twirling evils over there, right? I think also it allows us to draw useful lessons and messages, because that's much more what the real world is like. So.
Sure. Ashley, in your opinion, in your thoughts, watching the show and learning about the 10th Sea and seeing them for the first time, right? And then all the ramifications thereof, of the Federation coming together and Discovery coming home to Earth. And, we have great, reunion moments. Do you think, in your opinion, in terms of story building, structure, and writing, and with the pacing, that maybe perhaps it should have been episode 12 and episode 13 could have looked at maybe not necessarily the fallout or consequences thereof, but the ramifications of now we need to get into the politics and set the stage. Not only are we closing the book on story, but what about the epilogue? It's like we didn't really get an epilogue. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue maybe like the last 10 minutes of episode 13 kind of functioned as an epilogue, but it's mostly like, oh, we're all back together again. We're having a drink at the bar. Oh, look, here's Tilly, and she's gonna like attack everyone with flying tackle hugs because that's awesome. And so I think that's probably going to be how the next season opens. I think we're going to have some ramifications of, okay, let's talk to the 10C. We've made contact. Let's, see about bringing them in if they are interested in that. One of the things that really struck me in all of the council room sessions and all of the big Federation meetings is that even when there was disagreement, it was still, we understand why you disagree. The posture was one of listening, having a conversation, not debating. And even though there was a significant portion of the Federation that said, no, we need to just take these guys out. They were on board with like what Book and Tarka were putting forth. They, President Rilix, made a point of saying that you are not excluded from this council because you disagree. And I'm like, wow, can we do that in real life? Like, can we please make this a real thing? And so I want to see, how does that play out? Are we going to get more of that next season? I don't feel strongly like whether or not it would have changed my opinion if we had seen more of the fallout or some of the new Federation building at the end of this season. I felt like I was really happy with the ending, but I think that's probably going to be our opening conflict for season 5 of Disco.
Yeah. I think that tracks pretty well. Amy, you mentioned earlier that there were no real. Everyone here really mentioned that there were no real villains to this season, and Ruon Tarka was kind of presented as the will he, maybe won't he be the villain? Will he be the bad guy? He's the antagonist. He's the mad scientist genius. And we've had some of this type of character development before with Captain Lorca, where he turned out to be a bad guy. So there was a little bit of a guessing game. So Tarka, is he really a villain? No, he's not. He's got these very complex emotional motivations. But Amy, tell me what you thought about how all that finding that connectedness in a place where none really exists. What are your thoughts on Tarka's motivations and his character?
I thought the way they developed that was fascinating, and I think he's one facet of a larger picture, in the sense that he's working from a position of loss, right? And he's having to deal with loss, and he's not picking a wise way of dealing with that. But if I can, I'm going to answer your question, but if I can pull back for a second. They sort of framed this season as engaging with this notion of the Kobayashi Maru. And at first glance, it looks like, well, that's obviously Captain Burnham, right? You've got the impossible choice here, torn in different directions. But what I think, besides the just notion of the no-win scenario, when I think of Kobayashi Maru, I think of this idea of accepting loss. And if you go back to, say, Star Trek II, when Kirk is talking to Saavik, and he says, how you deal with how you deal with death is at least as important as how you deal with life. And that seems to be a through line, not just for Burnham, but for so many characters, for Book, for Tarka. It's a motivating different characters in different directions, but it's the same question. And I think it comes together beautifully through Jet Reno, of all people. Basically saying, if you go to look for him, it's not him. Any more than if I went to look for my wife, this alternate wife, it's not going to be her. And letting go, how you deal with death is at least as important, right, as how you deal with life. And I think we needed Tarka as this other.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Character, this other interpretation of loss, where at the end, nothing else matters. This is the only thing is filling this gaping hole in him, left by losing his friend. to the point that he would even sacrifice the only other friend he's ever had for this quest. And it's ultimately an empty quest. And of course, he ultimately comes to appreciate that at the end there and redeem himself. But I think we needed several different characters talking about and experiencing or contemplating loss. In the case of Burnham, accepting she might have to make the decision that does lead to loss. And the idea of, loss may be as personal as losing one person, or it might be as big as losing your entire planet. So I think if we were going to have a nuanced and meaningful discussion of loss, which this whole season seems to be, you needed a Tarka in there to show the unhealthy reaction, the ultimately fruitless reaction. But yet we can ultimately, I keep saying ultimately, by the end, we appreciate why he did what he did. He did the wrong thing for reasons we can, if not agree are right, at least we can agree they're understandable,
Sure. Ian, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, you have these two characters who aren't really proper villains. Certainly in the case of Book, you have a protagonistic character who then takes a turn, and both of these turns are motivated by the inability to healthily process trauma and loss, like Amy was saying. And that's the thing that gets under, that's the thorn in their sides, that's that thing that's driving them, that's just motivating them. They can't quite scratch that itch, to keep mixing metaphors here. They just can't get past this loss that they've had. And it isn't until the very end that they do achieve some means of understanding and some redemption. Certainly in Tarka's case, he does come to an understanding kind of at the very end. Book is kind of on an up and down kind of push and pull journey throughout the season, where he's kind of actively engaged in this conversation about loss and about his trauma and the processing of it with different characters at different points throughout the season. Tarka's a bit more of a closed book until really towards the very end. So we aren't really as following along on his journey as closely. And so I think as a result for me, that arc didn't fully land, I think, for me, the way that it did with Book, where I was able to really be with him for his whole journey from the beginning to the end of that arc of his. So yeah, I think that's one of the themes that this show absolutely hits on, and I think explores pretty well is, hey, look, see a therapist. It's okay. It's okay to get some help. It's okay to talk to people who love and care about you. You all have a support system out there. It's okay to use them and reach out. And that was one of the themes that this season really hammered home. And I thought it did more effectively than some of the other themes that they've tried to explore in the past.
Yeah, that's well said. Ashley, if Jet Reno was your therapist, do you think you'd get through all your childhood traumas in one sitting?
I mean, maybe not all of them, but I'm certain that she could give me a hand. In one of my reviews for this season, I described Jet Reno as and Tig Notaro really as like she uses comedy to disarm, and then she says something incredibly emotionally poignant. And it's like she is like a comedic ninja. So she comes in and she makes you laugh, and you're not expecting it. And then she says, "Oh, by the way, boom, counseling session," and then you're just emotionally gutted for the rest of the episode, and it's great. So I really loved that aspect of her character this season. And it was really fun because nobody expected it. Like, I mean, everybody just really loved the character of Jet. I mean, that was why, she got made into a regular, a recurring character on the show. And then, she's really was really delivering well, not just on her comedic bits, but on the emotional beats.
There it is.
There it is. The emotional beats. Yeah.
David Ajala as Cleveland Booker. I know the season dealt with loss, and I know that we have all dealt with our own loss in the past few years. It was personally difficult for me to watch a few scenes. Personally difficult, and David Ajala really came out. There was a video from the Star Trek mission that came out where a fan got up and hugged him, and they just embraced, and it was just one of those powerful, like, like that brotherly love, that feeling of we are in this together. It truly, we are connected on a deeper soul level. And throughout this entire season, David Ajala, masterful performance. That grip of reality, needing that, you gotta do the thing. You gotta save the planet. You gotta save the galaxy. You have to, that need to do, and that frustration and that helplessness. I felt that too. I felt that very much too, especially, I know so many people listening to this podcast and folks here in the virtual studio, you struggle with the reality that, you might have the answer. What you think is the solution. And, you can fix COVID if we only did this, if we only all wore our masks all the time over our nose properly, like they do in all the TV shows, and they look awesome doing it. Why can't we do that too? And it's difficult. So I understand I'm rambling a little bit here, but Amy, the grip of reality, dealing with COVID and feeling ineffectual, how did this season imitate reality? And how did reality imitate this season? Because they were writing and filming, when this happened. So you can see it on set. You can see certain distances, the way that the camera frames them, right? How wild is it to see a pandemic era show?
I was utterly floored several times by certain lines, or as you pointed out, the entire performance. Booker's whole journey of why would you want this to happen to anyone else once you've lost someone, right? So the motivation to just make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, so no one has to feel the pain you do. That I think you hit on the nail on the head when you said the word helpless, because I think that's we all collectively have had that experience now for a couple of years, and senseless death and loss, and not understanding why other people can't see the problem, or trying to communicate, we've got to do something. The way that came through was remarkable. And again, some of the lines, not even his necessarily, although his lines were amazing, his reactions to others, amazing. And again, other characters. The line of the whole season for me, and I was thinking about this, Ashley, as you were talking, is I think it's pretty safe to assume that everyone, no matter what calm veneer they present, is kind of a mess. And, this is the same thing that's being said in faculty meetings, right? About dealing with your colleagues and dealing with your students right now. Scratch anybody and they're bleeding right now. And this idea of being present for each other and aware of each other, and essentially a group experience of loss and of trauma, but also the isolating individual experience of that, and the way the show went back and forth between the collective and the individual, and how everyone had past histories that made their experience of grief, or their experience of stress, or their experience of trust or lack thereof, relevant to their own personal stories. And yet also collectively, they were all had this sense of danger and imminent peril and helplessness. It was just uncanny to me the way this particular season was so relevant. And the pandemic is one perfect example, but there's a lot of others going on. In terms of war and in terms of climate and in terms of all sorts of things, where can't we just work together? From that point of the spectrum to how do you deal with this on a personal level and do something like sleep at night, right? And I think they balanced that larger question of the mechanics of cooperation and corporate action with the individual examples there of people struggling and trying to show up for everyone else when they themselves are struggling. But there was also the exchange between Burnham and Culber, where he says, "I'm not okay," and she says, "How could you be?" But nobody else is either, right? And so balancing that recognition of the challenge as an individual to get through things, but also the need for action. You have to be walking wounded for a while in order to get things done that will hopefully put us all in a better situation. I'm rambling. My point is, it was uncannily relevant the whole season, I think. And I think they managed to strike some really, really important notes.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, wow. Ashley, Ian, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think I want to yes and everything that Amy just said,
right.
But also I want to talk a little bit more about also the political side of things to take it back to that conversation. It's funny, Ashley was talking about how the debate kind of felt aspirational. I tend to agree because I felt what was aspirational about it was that there was a robust debate about what to do. Actually, there was quite a robust debate. I really liked the debate. The debate was between two understandable points of view. That was the aspirational part. That was the part that isn't reflective of our current discourse, where we have a debate where one side just is using complete counterfactuals, and the other side, there's more debate on the other side because there's actual disagreement about reality and what to do about it. Whereas the other side of some of these so-called debates isn't even talking about objective reality anymore. So to me, the interesting thing was that this, I think one of the criticisms that gets levied unfairly at the new iteration of Star Trek is that it isn't aspirational anymore. And I disagree. I think it does reflect certain things in an aspirational way. And I think that this was an element of that. Like this, I loved the debate episode, that whole episode where everyone was standing. I love a debate. I was on the debate club in high school. Like, I love a good debate between two sides with actual facts that they can agree on using and arguing about and discussing, and understandable points of view. Like, I understood both sides of that argument. They had two fundamentally different approaches to how to solve the issue, but I understood both approaches. I really appreciated that aspect of Discovery this season.
Aspirational. Ashley.
Yes and amen. I think, adding to that, when we get the reveal at the end of the season of who is the president of United Earth, and it's Stacey James. Oh my gosh. So scenario, I'm watching my screener. I'm on vacation with my husband and my best friend and her husband, who's also one of my best friends. And so we're all sitting in different points of the living room. I've got my earbuds on. I'm watching this, and I'm watching the finale, and I'm I'm fist pumping because Tilly's back. Yeah, because she's my girl. And then throughout the whole, oh no, can we stop Booker and Tarka? I'm making Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone face, like, and then we're getting to the end. I think everybody's dead, and I'm like ugly crying, and then we get to the very end, and I'm like, oh, that's Stacey James. So many people are going to be angry, and I am here for it, because. Or it's not Stacey James, Stacey Abrams. My goodness, what's wrong with me? Who's Stacey James?
I thought maybe that was her middle name, and you were just tighter with her than I am.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all. Let's Mike, let's cut that. Sorry.
No problem.
Stacey Abrams. Thank you. All right. So Stacey Abrams is here, not Stacey James, whoever that might be. That's Mirror Universe Stacey Abrams. I don't know. Anyway, Stacey Abrams, not from the Mirror Universe. Like, regardless of your political affiliation, someone who works to make everyone who has the right to vote, like, make sure that they can do that, make sure voting is accessible, is a friend of freedom. And that is, I think that's something worth celebrating. There's a great podcast that she did with David Tennant on David Tennant does a podcast with, and that particular episode was Stacey Abrams. And she talked about how much Star Trek changed her life growing up. It gave her hope growing up in an area where she was discriminated against and a victim of prejudice and racism. And it made her know, simply, again, because Nichelle Nichols is on that bridge, I can make this happen. I can make this happen. And that was just really inspiring to me. I knew who she was. I didn't know a ton about her. And that was just a really great introduction. And so just knowing that, the symbolism of having somebody like that be your president of United Earth is really cool. Regardless of whatever political fallout there may be. Sorry, I got really excited about that.
Sure.
So, but anyway, that was cool.
Absolutely.
That was cool.
Absolutely. I mean, Stacey Abrams, here in the U.S., for listeners abroad, I guess controversial, but to me, she's a very reasonable politician.
Yeah.
She fights for voting rights across Georgia. She's been fighting for voting rights. She's a lawyer. She's helped so many different people, in between her legal and business career, in terms of opening access, opening doors for people who don't get them opened for. That's what people in power are really supposed to be doing. When I call my congressperson, it's not because, I want to complain about a mask. It's because I have a real issue that needs to be addressed in my community, and I need your help, please. And a lot of congresspeople do not do that for their constituents, but Stacey Abrams does. She picks up the phone, she goes to bat, she puts her lawyer hat on, and she fights. She's still fighting to this day for people who don't even want her fighting for them. That's the key. And yes, Nichelle Nichols being on the bridge of the Enterprise back in the 60s, inspired so many. And Stacey Abrams being on the show and having been inspired, I think there's a beautiful symmetry there. And only a 56-year-long franchise of Star Trek can really bring that to everybody and really show you, you can aspire to this. You can be better than you are today, than you are tomorrow, and you will find that success. So we need to get to a little bit more here before we start closing out. Real quickly, I do want to talk about some of the names and the FaceTime that we got with the bridge crew here. We had some sprinkles of personality across the bridge, across the entire season, more so than ever. We learned so much about Detmer and Owo. Did we learn about whether or not they were together? That's still questionable, right? I mean, Ian, what do you think?
I think that it's admirable that they tried to do a better job of this. It's something that they have not necessarily had the best results with, trying to give us a little bit more of the bridge crew. Season 1, they all were they might as well have not had names. We really didn't get to know them at all. Season 2, honestly, like that was when we first started to see like, oh, we learned a little bit about her background, and we got a little bit more about Detmer. And we finally had 2 members of the bridge crew we could name besides Saru. And that's fantastic. I think that season 3 went a little bit further along that. And then season 4, we saw more of an iteration on that. You know, we said goodbye to, I think, Bryce, not Reese. The fact that I'm still not 100% sure which is probably a sign they're not quite nailing it here. But I appreciate the continued efforts. It does still feel a little superficial at times. You know, we do run into the, hey, this is an episode where we're learning an awful lot about this character. They're either going to die or leave the show now. I'd rather we have a few more kind of these like we got with Owo and like we got somewhat with Detmer, just with more of the rest of the crew, where we get these organic opportunities to learn a little bit more, have some interaction with some of our main, mainline crew, members of the cast, and then, just kind of dip in and dip out of their lives, so that by the end of season 7 of this show, we can look back and see, like we can with a show like TNG and DS9, where we have a sense of like, oh, we got to know these characters. We have all these little character moments, and of course the other shows like Voyager and Enterprise too. But like we have these little moments that we can look back on and say like, oh, I really liked that moment that character had with that character. And I feel like we haven't gotten enough of those moments for me yet. 4 seasons into the series.
4 seasons in, Amy, where can we get more of those moments?
I think part of it's pacing. And I agree, by the way, that we absolutely do need those moments. And I think in part because every season is telling a story. There's not a chance. No, there is a chance, but they haven't taken a chance.
Right.
To slow down and have some moments that are not building to that one particular ending for that one particular story. And just Ian talking just now, I was thinking about something like, this is on my mind because the Shuttle Pod show has just started responding to the anniversary of Enterprise's Shuttle Pod 1 episode, which is, 2 secondary characters, or maybe one of the triumvirate and one secondary character, stuck in a shuttle for an episode. And we got to know and be so invested in those 2 characters that paid off for another 3 seasons. And there were episodes of multiple series like that, where you got a couple of the characters who aren't the captain or first officer in a moment separated, and we got to learn who they were. And you only have to do that once or twice to really build that investment, and then just keep building on what you've done there. But despite the fact you have a whole season to tell a story in Discovery, sometimes it feels kind of breakneck to me, in the sense that the characters don't get to breathe. They don't get to have the long meal. They don't get to have the ducking into someone's room and just having a heart-to-heart that isn't more an official, I'm coming to you for therapy kind of thing. Just people hanging out, right? Just have it, and part of that is the pacing, and of course you wouldn't stop and just have the long character moments when you think everybody's getting ready to die. But if you have moments of pause to build these characters, their imminent deaths will mean more when we're faced with peril. And I was looking at the Wikipedia page for the cast for this season, and the main characters list doesn't even have the full bridge crew. So again, I think we've got a lot of really compelling characters. I'd love to see more of them. And I think maybe if I like the season-long big arc story, but that doesn't mean we can't step off the path every once in a while and smell the proverbial flowers. In this case, meet the characters just a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Ashley, when we step off the beaten path and meet some more interesting characters, we definitely got some with Saru and Tarina, the Vulcan Navarre president. So to set this up for you, adult romance, right? And television. I'm so used to seeing, TV where it's a lot of sexy teenagers running around romancing each other, and it's supposed to be like mature relationships, but it's not. They just act like kids at high school. And so I think, for science fiction to portray an adult romance in this way was really quite interesting. We've seen it in TNG, in Star Trek Next Generation with Picard and Crusher, but here we're getting, like, it's almost like with time slows down. What do you think about all this?
One of the things I thought was really interesting about their romance is not just these are two mature adults, but one is an alien that doesn't look like a person with a different forehead or a different nose, or even different ears. And the other one is an alien that looks like a person with different ears. So I thought that was really interesting. I can't recall off the top of my head really seeing that before in the Star Trek series. Happy to be corrected on that if I'm forgetting about something. But I thought that was really neat. Also, like them, they're so sweet. Like it felt like watching like a really innocent, well, mature adult romance, but like still like it was such a sweet innocence about it. It's like, I'm gonna pass you a note, do you like me, check yes or no, like like there was like just such a sweetness about it, and it was a real moment of levity in a season that had really high stressful stakes. Just them and just them being open and honest and trying to communicate well with each other. I just thought that was really cool to see, and it's different, and it was healthy, and it was really affirming and positive, and I love it. I'm here for it. I ship it.
You ship it.
I ship it.
Ian, this Star Trek Discovery, poor Captain Burnham has dealt with a lot of not so healthy relationships in her life. Now that we have Booker in the fold still over the course of the season, what did you think about the whole dynamic of their particular relationship as the stress of the season went along?
Last season, how we each felt like their chemistry was much more palpable and frankly compelling than her relationship in the first two seasons. No offense to what's his name, but the relationship with Book has been kind of a highlight for me, and I really liked that in this season. We spent an entire season 3, really getting to know them together, seeing them come together, that relationship built over the course of that season. So we've now had that well established for that to now be effectively put into peril in this season, and have that be an effective source for dramatic tension. And I think it was. I mean, there were a few moments in this season where, to reference what Ashley said before, I was like, oh God, no, they're not about to kill him, are they? Like, the show does not always succeed in getting that kind of rise out of me, of actually putting that doubt in my head, of building that tension in me as I'm watching. So the fact that they were able to do it a couple of times is to the show's credit.
Yeah, it really is. Amy, I'm gonna throw this one to you here. Relationships amongst crew members, yes, but there's also a relationship with the starship itself, and this particular starship now has a consciousness in Zora, this brilliant AI that has developed on the ship. And showrunner Michelle Paradise had mentioned in interviews many times that, this season would start to integrate into that short Trek Calypso story. So I was really underwhelmed with Zora's involvement in the second half of the season, other than just putting up the lights and making the pheromones. So what's your thoughts on Zora here? Underutilized, or are we setting the stage for something else?
I hope we're setting the stage for something else, but I'm going to agree with you there. I thought the debate as to what to do with her was really fascinating, and the fact that she was able to be a part of that discussion felt like a very Trek kind of quandary. Am I a threat? Am I an ally? Can I be your crewmate? Sort of issue. And of course, given her capabilities, it's a huge asset, but it seemed like the integration happened very quickly. And we also lost, because she became a plot device to do things that more quickly than or instead of someone else. We lost the input of her own personality. And so it felt like she went from being a potential character to becoming a tool of the storytelling. And so I don't feel like that lived up to the expectation. And I'm very intrigued by the premise and the possibility of Zora. I'm hoping they're just planting seeds that will then, flower in the next season, because there's so many things that could be done there. But again, the pacing, with all the focus on this sort of imminent countdown, I think she just became a device to explain how they could do these things so quickly and so effectively, and we lost the character that we could have had.
Interesting. I'm seeing some nodding heads here from my other guests in the studio here. Ashley, Ian, any thoughts on what Amy just mentioned there?
Completely agree. I thought that, again, we had another great debate episode, and I liked that debate. It was really compelling. It was so Star Trek, and then that was it. We didn't really get a further exploration of that. It did feel a little bit like, not quite as good, but kind of what we got with the 10C, where we had this really compelling, like, oh man, this is pure Star Trek. What a compelling mystery. We gotta figure this out. We're gonna resolve this, and then we're gonna do something else, I guess. And it is hard to consistently get those, rising excitement, like, oh, this is an interesting idea. They're starting to, and they're not doing anything else with it. Okay. Because we are on to the next big thing that we have to get to, because we've got this big overarching plot. We've got this ticking clock. We've got to get to the next thing. There's no time for all that. We've dealt with it. That's what we did in this episode. Don't worry about it next week.
Yeah, I think I know Dr. David Cronenberg, as the mission log folks like to call him, Kovich, has established that Zora is a new species. She's a new type of being. And I guess maybe because, well, yeah, I think she is. I think it's really hard for us to imagine that she's just not fancy Alexa. Okay, good. Mine's not going to start talking. That's good. She starts talking enough when I watch Star Trek and they address the COMPUTER. But
computer.
Yeah, that one. Can't say it out loud in this house because she'll start talking to me. Anyway,
hello, computer.
Ian, you son of a gun.
So I think we need to find a way to make her more than just fancy Alexa. I don't know how we're going to do that. Hopefully we'll explore a little bit of that next season. But for now, to me, she's only really coming across as fancy Alexa. And how is that different from her just being a slightly more sentient computer?
Right.
I did like the Trill game. I thought that was a really interesting plot device to help her kind of process her emotions. And I mean, humans do that. Like we've got a lot of stuff on our mind. What do? We veg out, we watch a movie, or Mike, you and I both play guitar. We play instruments. Let's go play some music and, work out our feels, for some people, it's I need to go for a jog or I need to go hit the gym. We do different things to help us process complex emotions or or big problems we're trying to work through. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing. It also made me think of War Games, the 1980 something film, where the Whopper, the big computer, who runs all these nuclear bombs, he plays tic-tac-toe over and over again, and he finds the only winning move is not to play, which that's a whole other different thing. But
that's a whole other lesson.
But it's that same. I got those kinds of vibes. I got Whopper vibes from Zora, and Fancy Alexa vibes. Not I'm a sentient computer, but also not just a sentient computer. I'm another kind of sentient being. I just happen to live inside the ship's computer. So
fair enough. Setting the stage for next season, it sounds like there are plenty of opportunities for stories that have already been seeded in season 4. So, Amy, what are your final thoughts on Star Trek Discovery season 4?
I appreciate how much it spoke to our experience right now, and I think we got some really big payoffs, and the biggest one being an alien, as well as talking about big issues and helping us think through all the Kobayashi Marus we may be facing, and it left me wanting more of the characters, more of the after effects of what's happened, more of the development of this new Federation and its relationship with the Tin-Sea, and more of Zora, and more of the characters who've been active all season long. And I think that is a success, because I'm ready for season 5.
Wow.
Whenever they're ready to drop it.
Whenever they're ready. Ashley, your final thoughts on Star Trek Discovery season 4.
Great conversations about mental health, great conversations about aspirational politics, and how can we work to understand people with whom we disagree strongly, and not also think that person is a bad person because they disagree with me. I think those are really important aspirational ideas. I think also there's a larger conversation being had about, we can't just solve the problem for the immediate, the now. We have to think through, how does this affect the long run? So the conversation Book has with the Tin-Sea, it's not good enough that you mine in uninhabited areas. The waste that you're leaving behind is causing all of these problems. All of those are really important and relevant conversations to everything that we're dealing with now as a society. And again, Star Trek has always been a mirror of how can we imagine better? How can we do better? It's good stuff for season 4.
Good stuff for season 4. Ian, I'm going to have you take the last word here. Your final thoughts on Star Trek Discovery season 4.
I don't have much else to add to what Amy and Ashley already said, but I think anyone who's listened along with us for this season will know that I was a pretty big fan of the season overall. Certainly compared to season 3, I felt like the show was feeling a little bit more comfortable in its own skin. Certainly that was reflected in Michael's presence as a captain, which I felt, I kind of felt like, oh, look, this is just where you belonged. This was always your show. You probably should have been sitting in this chair earlier than now. And now that you're here, I kind of, the dynamic on the bridge just feels better. And a lot of strides forward in terms of doing a better job of giving meaningful moments to some more minor characters. But, I think that it's the kind of show where when they take a step forward in one direction, it's sort of, it in some cases brings more attention to the fact that these are areas they're still struggling with 4 seasons in. And I think that's unfortunate, because there's a lot of really good thematic exploration being at least attempted and usually actually achieved. So I think The show continues to deserve applause for all of that, and it certainly will have my attention next season.
Oh, yes. I can tell you for a fact that season 5 is probably going to be going into places that we hadn't anticipated. Something tells me that we have the seeds of great stories already, and I feel like they're going to pick up those seeds and run with them. I really enjoyed season 4. It was immensely wonderful, and as always, maybe it's my trademark now, but I have to highlight the fact that it's the most cinematic Trek we've had that doesn't exist on a movie screen. Simply put, it looks beautiful. It sounds beautiful. It's what a great show, and the production elements have been outstanding. Folks, thank you so much for joining this great conversation. My guests have been Dr. Amy H. Sturgis, Ashley Thomas, and Ian Buckley. You can find their social handles and their links in our show description on your favorite podcasting app. Just click on the show notes. And my name is Mike Slamer. Thank you for joining us on We Are Starfleet, a Star Trek podcast on the We Made This Podcast Network. And now for a sneak peek at Craig McKenzie's interview with Shawn Doyle.
Level 9 authorization required.
Then the thing about Tarka is the pinch points of his character must be really easy to latch onto. He's motivated by things like loss. He's consumed by this obsession that he has to get back to Oros, and it's all just easy to understand stuff. So all the other weird science fiction stuff and all the technobabble and all the science stuff in the background is incidental, really. It's just window dressing because that's what he's about. It's about these things we all experience, about these things that we all deal with.
Yeah, that's completely true. And again, there are some actors who really thrive on all that scientific stuff and all the details, and they're very good at it. I mean, I showed up the first day, and my first scene was with Anthony Rapp and Doug Jones in the engineering room, I think, when we were creating a wormhole. And all of a sudden, I'm doing all this stuff in the air, and I just kept saying to people, does it feel like I'm being specific and I'm doing stuff? They're like, don't worry, it'll be great. It'll look great. So then you kind of have to go, okay, I guess I'm like a 5-year-old again, going beep, boop, 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 and kind of giving over to that pretend. But the quality of the show and the design of the show and all the people who do all that stuff, first of all, once I saw the show, I understood how we are supported in what we do with what they're doing. I mean, it's phenomenal. And all throughout it, whenever we had to say there was a scenario of Discovery facing off with Bookship in later episodes, we were shown storyboards, really detailed storyboards about what things would look like. So we had a really strong idea of what the visuals would be, just enough to get the imagination flowing, or the 10C, for example, all of that. It's just such attention to detail that they do on that show. It's impressive. And talk about walking onto sets and just being blown away. I do have to admit that when I stepped onto the deck, I think my final day of the first episode, I did the scene, which was my opening scene in the show, where I come onto the Discovery for the first time and walking onto the flight deck and looking around at the captain's chair and the big window that right now is looking at a green screen, but you know what's going to be there in the show. That blew me away. That made me feel like a kid watching Star Trek again, original stuff. That was cool.
Had you had a lot of experience with green screen filming before that, or was it something relatively new to you?
No, I've had a fair amount of it over the years. I've never done anything that's primarily green screen. There's a lot of those films that are so animated. I've never been a part of something like that. I wouldn't know what that experience was like. But again, I think you just got to break it down to what that character as a human being is trying to do in that moment and allow the rest of it to work its way out.
It must have been pretty surreal being near Doug Jones, where he's in the stilts and the big makeup and you have to scream in his face, which is something you do in your first episode.
Yeah, I screamed in his face, and we were blocking the scene. Just in case some of your listeners don't know, when you show up on set, you block a scene where you figure out where you're going to move as you say various lines and do various bits of business. And then you rehearse the scene until every camera knows what it's doing and we know what we're doing, and then we shoot the scene. So in the blocking, we're not even at the rehearsal level yet. I just had an impulse to scream that moment at him, just to kind of see if I could get a real reaction from him and for myself and everything. And I almost blew my voice. And then I ended up having to scream for the entire rest of the day. And I almost blew my voice on that first scream. And I just was like, Doyle, you're such an idiot. Why did you do that? He's amazing. First of all, and I know that you've heard this, I'm sure, a billion times, but he's the sweetest, most thoughtful and generous of spirit person that I've met on set. Goes out of his way to make everybody feel so welcome there. And it sounds hyperbolic, but it's really magical what he does with that prosthetic on his face. When you're in person with him and you see it for the first time, you go, oh, there's a tall, skinny guy with a thing on his head. But then when you start to act with him, it comes alive. It's the weirdest experience because it's not as if it becomes really mobile and moves the way a face would move. It doesn't really, but for some reason, just his energy and his eyes, and the mouth moves obviously, and physically what he does energetically, there's no difference between relating to him or a person with no prosthetics or anything on the other side of me. It's really something. What an extraordinary gift that guy has as a performer. And he's done that time and again with so many films.
The physicality on Saru is great. The way he waves his arms when he walks and things, those little character details that he's woven in. But he's the king of prosthetics, isn't he? He's done it so many times.
I asked him this, and I doubt I'm talking out of school by saying it, but I said, how do you do this every day going into, because he has to go like hours and hours every day. And he said, well, for me, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to do, but the people who watch appreciate it so much that it just makes it worthwhile for me to do. They appreciate the show. They appreciate the character. And so that's all we can ask for is that people appreciate what we do and get something from it.
That was Craig McKenzie interviewing Shawn Doyle over on his website, kneelbeforeblog.co.uk. Again, please check those show notes in the description on your app for a direct link to that episode. This has been a lot, but we are tuning in for Strange New Worlds in a couple of short days, and I am very excited for this. So in the meantime, everybody, keep those subspace hailing frequencies open. Follow the show at Starfleet Pod on Twitter and Instagram for updates and news and, I don't know, whatever pops into our heads. Live long and prosper, everybody.